Now, it's fair to say there are some truly great games for the PS2, but what I'm looking at today isn't one of them. So Triggerman is a third-person shooter I recently found online, rated last on a list of over 1,000 PS2 games. Although what really drew me to it wasn't so much the rating, it was someone online claiming that it's worse than Drake of the 99 Dragons. And then I thought, well, I'm gonna have to check it out, because that is a very bold claim. Now, at this point I'd normally do a background information section, but in this case I can't, because outside of publishers and developers, literally nothing exists. So yeah, without further ado, let's see how bad this game really is. So the premise of this game is actually very similar to Drake of the 99 Dragons, in that it's very simple, while at the same time being utterly nonsensical. Basically, you have two mafia families on the brink of war due to a boss's son being murdered, with the other being named responsible for it. So to try and resolve the situation without violence, one of them hires the underworld's most feared hitman to broker peace by destroying their casino, murdering their men, stealing their diamonds, breaking into the boss's house, murdering even more people, then asking him to his face, "Can we resolve this peacefully?" To which he obviously says no, then you kill him as well. Then his granddaughter takes over, you proceed to go on a bloody rampage murdering everyone who gets in your way until she and her entire criminal empire is dead. But you know, not before having a sit down with her to talk it out, something which apparently took a lot to plan. I mean, it certainly sounds like it would after you hired a fucking hitman who proceeded to steal millions of dollars from them, killed their men, and murdered her granddad. Kind of begs the question why a sit down, the peaceful resolution, was the plan B in this scenario. You've just fueled the fire as much as physically possible, and now you're asking for peace. Honestly, how was this going to go anything but abysmally? Anyway, apart from that, there really isn't much else to say. Most of the story is painfully forgettable with almost nothing to make it stand out, especially since the cutscenes are all static images with zero voice acting. Oh, and they're unskippable, because you know, when you've got the first two, you might as well go for the holy trinity of terrible cutscenes. So the gameplay is where this game really shines, and by shines I mean becomes completely unbearable. Okay, so you have 8 levels broken up into 2 distinct gameplay styles, with the first of these being your standard action shooter, which in this case means running around incredibly bland colourless environments, killing everything that moves while you do objectives, then moving on to another incredibly bland colourless environment. These range from casinos where the guards protect the inside of a locked vault, office buildings, parking lots, mansions, train stations, and restaurants. And yes, I know you could argue that a bright colour palette wouldn't really go with the game's dark and gritty mafia vibe, but considering what the rest of it is actually like, I'm pretty sure they didn't give a damn about the colour scheme, because the only vibes this game gives me are rushed and unfinished. Firstly, these levels are painfully short, although they were obviously very aware of that, since they've included features to make sure you're playing for much longer than you realistically need to. These range from keycard collecting and backtracking, escort missions where the guy won't jump down 3 feet, meaning you have to waste 5 minutes opening a door, and of course the staple mark of any shovelware game, cranked artificial difficulty so fucking high that at points it feels virtually impossible. Genuinely, this has to be one of the most difficult games I've ever played, and naturally, it's for all the wrong reasons. Firstly, to the surprise of absolutely no one, the controls are arse. They're sluggish and unresponsive even on the highest sensitivity, and without a lock-on feature to compensate, hitting anything is an arduous task. Which of course is in complete contrast to the enemies, because while you struggle to hit something that isn't thin air, they have perfect aim and can shred your entire health bar in an instant, while also taking an entire fucking clip to kill. Now, before you ask, yes, you can headshot them, but given how much you struggle to just hit something, constant headshots are a bit of a tall order. On top of that, the enemy AI is painfully inconsistent, ranging from brain-dead morons who spend all of their time bobbing in and out of cover when they can't see you, to hyper-aggressive lunatics who run up on you from the other side of the map, and if you don't spot them quickly enough, you don't stand a chance. And no enemy sums this up quite like the bosses. See, normally, bosses get harder the more you progress, but here, they've taken a unique approach in that they obviously didn't give a shit. Since two of them just bob up and down endlessly, doing nothing while you pelt them with bullets, one of them runs around the whole time using hit and run tactics, and the final boss was by far and away the easiest in the entire game, so easy in fact I can show you the whole fight. Although don't worry, it wasn't all a cakewalk, because some evil bastard decided to include a boss that I'm convinced was designed by the devil himself. Because the moment you shoot him, he'll proceed to run up on you relentlessly for the entire fight, and that, paired with buffed health, enormous damage output, and terrible controls on your part, means you just aren't equipped to deal with it, and 99% of the time, you'll be dead before you even get a chance to fight back. I died to this over 40 times, and the only reason I beat him was because I realised that throwing knives don't aggro him, and then his AI just decided to break anyway. Now at this point I want to talk about the weapons, because while most of them are pretty inoffensive, the best weapon, without a doubt, is the knife, in a game that's literally called the Trigger Man. I mean, it kills everything bar bosses in one hit, you don't struggle to aim, and you always have access to it. Granted, you can't kill people from a distance, but even so, my first thought when dealing with an enemy was almost always, can I knife that person? Because it's so much less of a headache, especially when some weapons straight up make the game harder. The sniper, for instance, is always scoped in, which as you can imagine is incredibly unhelpful, not only because it limits your vision and makes it far less useful than it should be, but even when you're not using it, by simply going past it in the weapon menu, you're liable to get stuck in the scope, and this in some areas is almost certain death. There's even a level that starts with a sniping section, and it's the hardest part of the entire game for precisely this reason. The terrible controls paired with the inability to scope out for a wider view means you can't see who's shooting you, and when you do find them you're already dead because you've been shot by someone else. Oh, and just to add insult to injury, you have to do this entire impossibly difficult section, then basically half the level before you reach a checkpoint, meaning if you die at any point, you have to start the whole thing all over again. Now at this point you might be wondering, surely it can't get any worse. Well, it can. See, you might remember I said this game is broken up into two gameplay styles? Yeah, well the other is stealth, and including it was arguably the biggest mistake in any video game ever. It's the definition of barely functional. And just to put it in perspective, stealth shows up twice in this game, yet it took up nearly half my footage. It's unbelievable how badly it works. Right, so what happens is occasionally at the end of levels, cops turn up, who you apparently can't kill even though you've murdered everyone else indiscriminately, meaning you have to sneak past them. Although, as you can imagine, this is much easier said than done, because if you do so much as exist a bit too hard, you'll get spotted. For example, sneaking from the kitchen to the front door of a restaurant took me 45 minutes, a task that when you do manage it, takes about 2, and that's not even counting the street section once I got outside. On top of that, not only does the game provide almost no help, when it does decide to give you guidance, it tells you the wrong thing. For example, the first level has you sneaking out of a casino, and there's a spot where your character says, this is a good spot to lay low for a bit, implying you're in the right place. Although in reality, all that happens is you get stuck here indefinitely because you're actually supposed to hide somewhere else. The game never tells you this. In fact, when it came to stealth, I had to use a video guide every single time, because unless you want the world's most enormous migraine, working it out on your own is pretty much out of the question. And to be honest, while not quite at the same level, this rule can be applied to most of the game's other objectives. Because without checking the menu for every little thing you need to do, it's almost impossible to work out what's going on, which I know isn't a particularly arduous task, but even so, it's still really shitty game design. Take for instance when you have to blow something up using C4. Now, not only are you never made aware C4 is even a feature, since unlike health or ammo you never actually collect any, but you hardly ever have to use it, so the only indication you need to are these incredibly easy to miss outlines. I should add, there's actually a part where the game tells you what to do. Which begs the question, if they could do this once, why not do it all the time? Since spending 15 minutes figuring out that these cars are actually destructible and you need to destroy them to trigger the final boss was a gigantic pain in the arse. Now, I'm aware that a lot of this struggle came from my desire to figure stuff out on my own, but that's part of what makes games fun, and honestly in this it's pretty much impossible. Never has a game given me such a constant state of confusion. So that was Triggerman for the PS2, and yeah, it's bad. But is it as bad as Drake of the 99 Dragons? Not quite, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, it's dreadful with almost no redeeming qualities whatsoever, but it's not quite on that level. Admittedly, it does have a lot of the same things that makes Drake a bad game, but they're all slightly more bearable. For example, the difficulty is bullshit, but it's not always bullshit. The controls are bad, but they're not as bad. Also, it didn't make me feel physically sick to the point I had to stop playing. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.